So with the upcoming release of the Squish It sweater, which you see here being all squishy, I just wanted to take some time to discuss yarn substitutions. This is actually going to be, or I hope it's going to be, a little bit of an example of how you might go about substituting any more unusual yarn. I already have a detailed post on yarn substitution, but when you have a yarn like this, which is kind of a little bit different, it can be a bit tricky. So I want to discuss all the things that you need to consider when substituting. So let's just move this out the way. And first of all, I want to show you the properties of this yarn. So this is called Mega Mohair. It's a double knit yarn, but actually it works up more like a chunky. I've used a 12mm hook for this stitch pattern. Stitch pattern itself is detailed in the sweater pattern. That's kind of almost irrelevant when yarn substituting. Obviously you have to swatch in the same pattern, but the principles apply to any stitch pattern. It's got lots of drape. It's really light. This yarn, I'll just give you the details of the actual yarn while I'm starting. So it's called Mega Mohair. Its fibre content is 78% kid mohair, 13% wool and 9% nylon. So probably the core is going to have some nylon in it. That gives it strength. The mohair is what gives it this super fluffy halo. The halo is like a ring around the core, is the fluffy fuzzy bit. It's exacerbated in this yarn, but most yarns, or many yarns, have at least a little halo. So yeah, the wool adds a bit of bulk to it as well. Normally with the lace weight mohair, which I'll show you, there's not as much kind of substance. So when substituting yarn, the primary goal is to check that it meets gauge if you're making a garment, but you also need to check that the swatch you've got is actually appropriate for the project you want to make, because it's all very well meeting gauge, but if you get a piece of fabric that's stiff as a board, or full of gaps, it might not be right for, something really dense and unmoving is not going to be right for a garment. All of these swatches are 12 stitches across by 12 rows deep, and I've used a 12mm hook for all of them. So we've got a couple of hooks here. We've got my Clover and More, which is a plastic hook. We've got just a wooden bamboo 12mm hook there. My gauge that we're going to be looking to reproduce is 7 stitches and 6.5 rows. So in 10 centimeters, that's 7 stitches across here and 6.5 rows. A video on yarn substitution wouldn't be complete unless I also talked about blocking. So whenever you're making a swatch, you treat the swatch the same way you're going to treat the finished garment. Now, this swatch is not blocked, it meets gauge unblocked. I did do a very gentle wet block of the sweater, so I soaked it when it was in separate pieces before I joined it. And I'm not going to do any more blocking on it. I don't feel it needs it. That said, some of the swatches may benefit from blocking. The impact blocking has will depend on the fibre mostly. And I do have a whole separate post on blocking, which I will link to. I also have a separate post about making and measuring gauge swatches. I'll link to that, so I'm not going to repeat that stuff here, but it is useful to be familiar with how to accurately make and measure a gauge swatch, and blocking is something that does feature in that. Okay, so I'm going to just leave that up here while I show you some of the substitutions I tried. First off, I wanted to substitute with other types of mohair or fluffy yarns. So two of the most common fluffy yarns in that sort of style, you've got mohair and you've got suri alpaca or brushed alpaca. So that's where I started to experiment with. Let's look at the alpaca first. I'm going to list all of the yarns in the comments, so apologies if I don't give details verbally. It's too much to hold in my brain at one time. But this is basically a 4-ply alpaca, and this swatch is made with 2 strands held together. You can see this is quite a thick, there's quite a big halo, so it's actually quite robust, although the core of it's fine. There's quite a lot of floof to it, and when you compare it with our original, you can see those 2 strands together. Obviously they're not similar, but when you take the halo into account, these are quite chunky. So I made gauge without problem with this one. There's a lot of movement in it. It's still super light. So this is the Surrey Alpaca, 2 strands held together, which matches gauge. So that's one option that I think would work really well. Next, I took some brushed alpaca, and so this is a drops brushed alpaca silk mixed with a very basic 4-ply sock yarn. That's just a paint box sock yarn. I wanted to have something very not fluffy to mix it with. So this sock yarn's got quite a high twist, so there's no halo on it. A lot of other 4-ply yarns have more of a halo, and I think they would probably be preferable. But actually you get this quite nice mold effect. So this is 1 strand of sock yarn with 1 strand of brushed alpaca silk. The sock yarn gives it a bit more robustness, but you've got lovely movement. So again, I think that would be really nice. You could play with the different colours, colour tones. This almost has like a semi-solid mild look. So that's drops brushed alpaca silk with a 4-ply sock yarn. So that's the alpaca versions. I also wanted to have a play with some mohair. So this was some of the mohair I used, and this is a lace weight mohair, and you can see the core of this is super fine. This alpaca, it's actually, this mohair, this is 72% kid mohair and 28% nylon. I actually found about 4 cones of this in a thrift store, so I don't have the make or anything, but it's a fairly standard mix. First of all, like the 4-ply with the drops brushed alpaca, I mixed 1 strand of the same sock yarn with 1 strand of mohair. Now there's a colour change in here because I used 2 types of mohair. I started off here with this mohair and the sock yarn, and I was worried there wasn't too much of a halo on this. This is goodness knows how old this mohair. So I switched to something newer, which was again drops super kid silk. So this, whereas this one has a nylon core, this one has a silk core. Similar to work with. I do like the silk though. You do notice, or I noticed in the feel when I changed from that yarn to this yarn, this was a lot softer. So you can see here where I've gone with the cream and then I've changed to the green. But regardless, so I did not make gauge with this. It was too fine. I got, if I just look at my notes, I got 9 stitches and 7.5 rows. The gauge I was going for was 7 stitches and 6.5 rows. So that was just too tight. So that one was a no, but I do like the effect it has. I think it's really pretty. Next off, because I did like that effect, I tried adding another strand of mohair. So this again is 4-ply sock, 2 strands of lace weight mohair and a 12mm hook. So we've got those 2 I just showed you. I used both of those with that same sock yarn, and I nearly made gauge with this. So I got the row gauge, the 6.5 rows per 10 centimetre, and instead of 7 stitches I got about 7.5. Now that happened a few times with these swatches, but actually it's not insurmountable. If I just relax my tension a bit, I'm gonna get gauge with that. If I still don't, with this particular pattern I'm using, the stitch gauge relates to the length of the sweater. So actually it's quite easy to add a few more stitches to the body to get the extra length if you need it. I love this fabric. I I just really love everything about it. As soon as I added an extra strand of mohair, you can see all the fluff, it felt amazing. It just felt really soft. It's light, it's kind of silky, loads of movement, so that would be great for a garment. I think this is a really good substitute and I would definitely do that. I love the marl with the different colour strands. You can really play when you're working with multiple strands. You can really play with like combining colours and getting these lovely tones. Okay, next off, I thought I'd try upping the more standard yarn. So instead of using the 4-ply sock yarn, I thought I'd mix double knit with some mohair. So here's the first one we got. This is a Yarn Smith's merino double knit, which is a lovely yarn actually. It's very affordable merino, and that is mixed with one of the strands of mohair. It was that light green one that I showed you. We've got one strand of DK with one strand of lace weight mohair 12mm hook. Did not make gauge here, so I got 8.5 stitches and 8 rows, so that's just kind of smaller everywhere. Interestingly, it was a bit more relaxed than my sock yarn and one strand of mohair, but there wasn't a lot in it. I think there's so much variation when you're working with a big hook. It's as much about you keeping your tension relaxed as it is about the yarn almost. So as much as I think that looks fun, that was a no. So what I did next is I added another strand of mohair. So here we've got that same lovely green yarn with, again, I used that cream and that light green. I did actually make gauge with this. So if we compare it with that, it's much thicker, this. I mean, it's a lovely fabric. It's definitely got the squish. You'd get a warmer sweater out of this, but I really like this as an option. You can see there I've lost some of my loops. It can take a while getting used to working with multiple strands. The trick is to make sure that whether you ball it or you're using centre pull, that the yarn flows really easily. So that one I was really happy with. That goes in the win pile. Seeing as I loved adding strands of mohair, I thought I'm just going to add another one and work with 3 strands of lace weight mohair, which I got this, which I absolutely love. It's as it's so light. Again, if you want something really floaty and cloudy, this is the way to go. I did make gauge with that. It's obviously a little more transparent. You can sort of see my hand through that, but that works with the style. This uses that light green, that natural, and I've got another slightly darker green mohair, kid mohair silk. So that's the same as the lighter green. I just think that's, oh, it's delicious. So that goes in the yes pile. So that was all the swatches where I paired either a mohair or a Surrey floof with a more standard yarn. So your 4-ply fingering weight sock yarn or your double knit. So next I looked at other widely available fluffy yarns. I've come across this, which is a Stylecraft. It's called Stylecraft Grace. I'll put the details in the notes. And it's just got a fluffy core, and I thought, well, this will be really interesting to pair with some mohair. I started by pairing Grace with one strand of the mohair. That's that natural colour one. I did not quite make gauge with that. It was quite close, but actually it was 7.5 stitches. I got the row gauge, again, didn't quite get the stitch gauge, and it's quite it's kind of quite holy. I wasn't that keen. I mean, it does look lovely, but I wasn't that keen on the way that combination worked up. So that was my first swatch with the Grace and a strand of mohair. So I changed it up and I added, instead of the mohair, another lace weight, but this is a lace weight Surrey Alpaca. So again, it's got a slightly different fluffy tone to the mohair, and there's kind of more substance to it, like the fluff is more fluffy. That's the only way I can really think to say it. So these are both lace weight. So if you look at those together, you can see there's a lot more going on the alpaca than there is on the mohair, but the mohair fibres are kind of longer, so they're kind of finer, but they spread out more. So you do get like a different effect with the mohair and the alpaca. This was the result. Now, I made gauge with this, but I had to try twice. So first time I got the same gauge, again 12mm hook, 7.5 stitches, 6.5 rows, so just half a stitch out. I worked this twice. There's less rows in here because I relaxed my tension and then I just sort of run out of yarn. But made gauge this way, and actually I do prefer this one. Is still as light, but it feels like it's got more substance to it. Like this is almost a bit too floppy. This has got nice loft, I believe they call it, like the way that Alpaca sort of captures the air is slightly different to the Mohair, so that gives it a bit more body. They're both lovely, but I would definitely go with this for a sweater. So that was really the last of me playing with the kind of Mohairs and those traditional fluffy yarns. Next off, I went to single strands only, so no more mixing, and some slightly different yarns. So I wanted to try some more widely available yarns that were at a decent price point. Although for this sweater you don't actually need a huge amount of yarn. This is quite an expensive yarn. So I wanted just to make sure that you have a range of options. So first one I tried from Stash. I basically had a little look round, like the Grace, at kind of commonly available yarns which had a bit of fluff. So this one worked really well. This is leader of the pack. It's a Hobbycraft yarn and it's mostly acrylic with some alpaca. So the alpaca gives it this kind of fluffy halo, but it's quite affordable and I really liked how it worked up. This matched gauge, it's got nice drape. This will be, because it's got a much thicker core, this will be warmer. It's like much of a sort of wintry sweater, like amazing. I really liked how this worked up. So that was a win. I also tried, I've got a little yarn shop in the village where I live, so I had a little look down there and I found this James C. Brett Norsk lightweight chunky. And again, I really liked how it worked out. I did make gauge with this, so I love the little neps, the little tweedy bits in this. This is 85 meters per ball and it's 88% acrylic, 8% polyamide and 4% viscose. So there's no kind of natural animal fibres in here, but it's really light. It's definitely got that lightness that the Mohair has got, and it's got a nice amount of fluff on it. It's a good halo. I think this is a really good substitute. I haven't checked yet how widely available it is, but I know certainly in the UK James C. Brett is quite available. So that was a good win for me. I also tried Drops, another Drops yarn. Drops Air it was called, and this was the result. So Drops Air, I don't know if it's almost like a chainette, but it's super light. And I don't have the ball band with me, but I will put the details in there. But it's super light. It's a synthetic yarn. It's got this nice sort of semi-solid tone to it, but Drops do it in a whole range of colours. This did make gauge, but it's not for me. I don't really like the stitch definition. It's really interesting how the stitch definition changes. It's very like loads and loads of drape on it, but this is really an example of just because something meets gauge, it doesn't mean you're going to want to work with it. For me, it's too gappy. You don't get that lovely, like when you look at this original, the kind of floof fills the gaps, and actually, yeah, it just wasn't for me for this project, even though strictly speaking it made gauge. I mean, you pull it a tiny bit and it kind of, you just lose all the niceness of the stitch. So it'd be great for other projects, not right for this one. And I really wanted to show you this just so you could see that it's more than about just hitting gauge. Now the next thing I tried was something a bit different. I've never worked with it before, and I thought, let's try something a bit out there, something that has the floofiness, but in a very different way. So I'm going to show you my chenille experiments. This is my little box of chenille. I got 3 different chenille yarns, slightly different weights. I've never crocheted with chenille before, and I don't know if you have, but it's a bit like crocheting with, my friend said crocheting with spaghetti. It is very slippery, that's the only way I can describe it, and the jury's out. Let's just say that. I've still got all the balls attached because I will undo the swatches and use the yarn for something else. So I got this chunky and made a swatch with that. I actually quite like the swatch, but it's interesting how the stitches look very different. So in this one, you've got your little ridge V's there, but these little yarn over, these bits here, these are really prominent in this swatch with all the chenille, whereas in this one, I mean, if I look hard, you can see there these bits here, but they're not at all prominent. So that was really interesting. The stitch definition was very different. This one didn't get anywhere near gauge. It was way too chunky. I think we had maybe 6 stitches and like 6 rows, 5.5 rows. So that was kind of a no from the off, but it was useful to play with. Then we had double knit. So this is a double knit chenille. So this was the swatch. I mean, you can see it's the drape is like ludicrous. I really struggled with getting, because this was a finer yarn with a 12mm hook, I really struggled with getting consistent stitch tension on this. You can see my stitches are all over the shop. I kind of got there a bit by the end. I do think I actually made gauge with this, but this is no good for like, it just, to me, looks a bit of a mess. The hook was just too big for this yarn. You've got all these holes and it's just, yeah, it's so slippy. And I did find that my tension tightened up when you kind of pull through. As soon as your loop's off the hook, it kind of tightens up on you. So this was very not right for what I'm looking at. So then, like Goldilocks, we try the one in the middle. So this is called Chenille Love. This is a Rico, and you've got 110 meters in 100 grams. It's marginally, well, you can see it's finer than the Yarn Smith's Chunky, and it's chunkier than the double knit. Now I've got a double size swatch here because I started off with a 12mm hook, and I didn't make gauge, it was too chunky. So I decided to switch. Again, you can see, so this is the 12mm section here. The stitches are a bit all over the place. I just don't think it suits the yarn. But then I went down to a 10mm hook and I made gauge, and actually, again, the stitch pattern, it really does look very different from the original. But if I was to use chenille, this is where I go. So I'd go down to a 10mm hook, so you get a bit more substance about the fabric, and I would use this kind of mid-level, probably Aran weight. And I think now is a good time to say that when you are yarn substituting, one of the tips that is given is look for the meters per gram. So, you know, compare the number of meters in a 50 or 100 gram ball with your possible substitute. And if you're using the same fibre blend or a very similar fibre blend, that is a really useful way to compare. However, if you're not using the same fibres, that becomes irrelevant. So this mohair, for example, I think it was 200 meters in a 100 gram ball. Whereas you start going to a lace weight, and these tend to come in 25 or 50 gram balls, and you're looking at 800 meters in 100 grams. And that's sort of similar fibers, but when you then start looking at your chenille or these totally different fiber blends, the kind of weight starts to get irrelevant, because you're comparing apples and bricks. It's just not the same. So I think I've hammered that point home. So the last substitution options I want to share with you that I tried is using wool. Here are some of the swatches that I made. These were all made with yarns that were in my stash, so I'm just going to pile them up. Okay, so all of these swatches are different types of wool. We've got this one, which is, it's called Happy Sheep from Hobby. Here it is in another colour. So this, I believe, strictly speaking, they call it an Aran, but it's more a chunky weight, or a heavy Aran, heavy worsted. This is 160 metres, 174 yards in 100 grams. And then we have this, which is Retreat, which is a West Yorkshire Spinners yarn, and that they call a chunky. Here it is in another colour. So it's chunky roving, so it's a kind of single strand rather than plied. And this one is 140 metres in 100 grams. And this is 100% blue-faced Kerry Hill. That is kind of similar but softer than the Hobby version. I love this yarn. Then we have this, which I believe is We Are Knitters, the Petite Wool. So it's kind of like a chunky roving wool, not too dissimilar to the Retreat, but a little bit heavier. And then we have an even heavier wool, and this I think is Cheeky Chunky, which is a from a brand called Wool Couture, but you can get this kind of chunky roving wool in quite a number of different brands. This one I just used a bit of leftovers. So for this one, which is the one that borders between chunky and a super chunky weight, I didn't make gauge. It was a bit too chunky for that. So I just wanted to show you, because I actually think it's an absolutely beautiful stitch in this this yarn. Then these ones, so this one I did make gauge with just about. You can actually see, it's better on this side, how my tension has changed. And I'm going to make a confession here. I think I changed the hook size halfway through this gauge, because you can see it's much broader. Stitch is much bigger in this lower bit, so I think I shrunk my hook size down in that one. And this is a note to remember, kids, that you think you're going to remember, so you don't write it down and you don't remember. So that's what happened with that one. Then these two, which I've just remade because I couldn't remember the others, so I know what these are. This is West Yorkshire Spinners and your Hobby yarn. Now these are very similar from gauge, and actually row gauge was pretty decent for both of them, but the stitch gauge was a bit tighter. So one was, they were both about 8 stitches instead of 7. Now normally I'd say, okay, we need to relax the tension, make the stitches bigger so we get our 7 stitches. And here's where blocking can really make a difference. I know from experience that with wool, blocking can stretch it out. So it's not, if I block this swatch, it's going to be very easy for me to reduce that 8 stitches in your 10 centimeters to 7 stitches. I didn't block my original swatch. That doesn't mean I don't have to block any fabric if I want to substitute the yarn. So say I want to go for a wintry version and use this Retreat, which I think is a lovely, I love the stitch pattern it makes. This roving wool, I think it works really well with these post stitches. I could block this, make gauge with the blocked version, and very easily make a sweater. It's going to be a very different sweater to what I make with this, but that doesn't mean it's wrong, and it doesn't mean like I'm not cheating in any way. And I think after this very, very long video, one of the key messages I want you to take when it comes to yarn substitution is kind of try it and see, because it may be something a little bit out there, it may be totally different to the original pattern, but that could create something absolutely amazing. I mean, a sweater in this and a sweater in that would be so different, but they'd both be really lovely garments. I mean, I'd wear that as a sweater. Yeah, so I think get bold. What's the worst that can happen? You have to frog your swatch and start over. Have fun experimenting, and here's a very quick rundown of the swatches that I think would work for the Squish It sweater pattern. So here are the final swatches that I would happily use in this pattern. So starting top left, we have the original swatch there. Next along on the top row, we have the 2 strands of Surrey Alpaca fluff. Then we have on the top right, that is 1 strand of brushed alpaca, the drops one, with 1 strand of sock yarn. Coming down to the middle left, 1 strand of DK merino held with 2 strands of lace weight mohair. Here we have 1 strand of sock yarn, and that is held also with 2 strands of lace weight mohair. That one might need a little bit relaxing, might benefit from a little bit of blocking. Then on the centre right, we have 3 strands of lace weight mohair held together. Love that. Down here on the bottom left, we have this pink one, which is 1 strand of the Stylecraft Grace yarn with 1 strand of lace weight Surrey Alpaca. Then the next one along, this one here, that is our James C. Brett Norsk yarn, followed by this one, which is the leader of the pack. These are all just single yarns. And then lastly, on that bottom right, that is the Retreat Chunky Roving. So you can just see from that how different they all are. They all have different textures, but taking into account all the different properties that they have, they would all work in their own ways for this pattern or the Squish It sweater. I really hope you found that informative. If you've got any questions at all about yarn substitution, please do drop them in the comments below. I'm going to list all the yarns I've used in the description, so do check out that as well. None of these are affiliate links or anything like that. These are mostly just yarns I've had in my stash, and some of the yarns I bought specifically to play with swatching for this project. So hope that's useful. Please do subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and do check out the sweater pattern that the swatches are all about, which I will link here and in the description. Thank you for watching.